Also, I would be willing to do it anytime as well. I love this.
Is
I've done
Marlissa around? Oh, there she is. Let's see. Okay, as you guys are aware, we are in the section on humanity and sin, but we're talking about sin at this point. So there will be a long stretch, you might say, this week of talking about original sin, primarily sin, original state, original righteousness, all sorts of things like that. So that's the idea of what happened at the beginning. So originally thinking Adam and Eve sort of stuff. And that would be pretty much consumed the entire week. So that's something to think about. Another thing to think about is not next week, so I don't know if to think about it next week. There's going to be, yeah, right there. I'm not here those days, though I think I might be here now that day possibly, which would be good if we were to knock that out. There's a review day, which someone will have to help lead that review, and then there's an exam day, which sure, yeah, pretty. Could do paper, we could possibly do it online if everybody wanted to do it at a certain time online, come in and do it, but probably have a proctor here and they'll proctor that exam. Okay, so that's coming up, and you can see the stuff we're doing there. We didn't quite finish original state stuff right here, a little bit, but we mostly did. So we're looking at original sin this week a lot. All right, anyone want us to pray with you or pray for you? Or pray about something that you think needs to be prayed about? Did you have a thing? Or no? Okay. Go trips. I'm gonna pray about go trips then. So just talk to a number of the leaders, most of the leaders I suppose were sitting there, but everybody's pretty much at crunch time to buy tickets right now. So for some of you need to raise money still and make decisions about if you're actually going and not going, stuff like that. So, and then to buy a good ticket, get good prices on tickets and all that would be sweet. So that probably is going to happen for most teams, I think, this week actually. And since we don't have go trip meetings, it's a little bit weird to be making those decisions this week. But anyway, we could pray that there are some students that are on the edge of either not being able to go, don't have enough money. So we could pray about that. Dear Lord, we do, again, thank you that we're here. Thank you that we have opportunities to study and to learn about ourselves and about what happened in the past. And I pray that we would do that well, so we would not be confused by the very thing we're studying. We do recognize that there are satanic forces literally that don't want us to understand things well. I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would lead us to all truth. So you said you're a teacher, and I pray that you would do that, and especially in this area. We don't want to be confused about the very thing that confuses us, so help us with that. We do pray for go trips, and specifically there are some students, a lot of students who need to finish raising money, and there are some students who are on a do or die time. Next couple of days, the money's either got to come in or else they can't go on the trip they've been planning on. So pray that you would provide for those who are raising money, provide for those who are trying to do that. And inevitably, sometimes you don't provide in that way. And so then the students have to make other plans and such. And I pray that you would be with all of us as we adjust, I guess you might say, to what we hoped for, what we thought maybe you were leading us to. At times it doesn't go that way. I pray that you help us to understand those things and to thrive, you might say, in spite of it, but really it's thrive in the way that life does work out, because you said if righteous person's paths are steps are ordered of the Lord. I pray that, I hope each one of us could be saying that about ourselves, well, I'm righteous. I actually am trying to live my life well and be a holy person that follows God, and therefore my steps are being ordered by God, and you are taking care of us. I I pray that that will become even more evident, like this week, it's either this week or next week, it's kind of the tickets are going to happen. So I pray that you'd be leading and guiding all of that. Be with us here in class, help us have a good time, and to learn a lot. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Excuse me. Okay, humanity and sin. Again, we have talked about humans who were awesome and still are. So if you don't think that you lose the image of God, remember we talked about John Wesley, he thought people lose the image of God potentially, if that's what he really meant, but they lose it. Sin turns them into an animal only, they lose that. And then somehow God graciously was giving it back to them. God graciously was giving it back to them. Except some versions of that version of theology don't have a person getting it back very easily. So you can be out of the image of God, and that has been used to justify treatment of certain peoples at certain times, etc. Because you would. If they're not made in God's image, it's like your dog. You do what you think is good, even if the dog don't like it, something like that. Okay, we're past that. We're into the stuff about sin, and I think we were on this one. Well, actually, we're past that one. I wanted to pull up number 4, I think is the one I actually want. Okay, the beginnings of sin. We'd started this, didn't quite finish it. This is about our original state more than original sin. Where did it come from? People didn't start with it, and neither did part of what we were supposed to conclude from this page, potentially, is Satan and demons didn't start out sinful either. As near as we can tell, it's not as much biblical data as we might want at times. But clearly this serpent, which seems to be Satan, equated. Clearly there seem to be angels that fell. We call them demons, or the Bible calls them demons, and it's that stuff. But there's a time when they weren't. So if angels fell, then there's a time when they didn't fall. If Satan was sinning, or if he fell somehow, he wasn't at all points sinning. The reason that's a big point about creation, because remember a little bit of this is about humans being created, a little bit of creation stuff. If God made sinners, he made them sinful, we have a bit of a different God than you thought. Or at least that I thought. So if God created sinful beings already sinful, even if it was demons, you're hey, I don't care, demons, whatever, I care about humans. Well, still, it would be God created sinful beings who end up getting punished for it. We find out that Satan, demons, they get thrown into hell. Sinful humans get thrown into hell. They're getting punished for it. So it's this issue of theodicy. Did God make people already bad? Did he make demons already bad? Did he even make just Satan already bad? And it appears in the Bible the answer to that would be no. Which means God isn't the one to blame for it. You do still have this issue about ability, because clearly in the Bible, these creatures are falling. So humans, I would argue Satan, angels, demons, they're all falling. So he gave them the ability to fall. And you have that, you have to explain that. God gave these creatures very good, and you made it all awesome, but then they all started dominoes. So keep going. And if God made them with the ability to sin, but without sin, you probably could make more sense of that. He didn't make us do it. He also didn't stop us from doing it. He made us moral beings with choices to be made. That's how we ended the class last time. That it's actually more loving. Many philosophers, Christian philosophers, would argue it's only truly loving if there's actually choice to be available. And so, moral choice in this case. We can choose to love him. To love God, you have to be holy. No one can see God. No sinner can be in God's presence, that type of thing. So you'd have to make holy choices in order to be with God. And that means that God's not to blame for sin. Some people and some groups, I don't want to make Calvinists bad in this course, even though I do disagree with many of their conclusions. But Calvinist type persons think about the same thing. They're then that would make God not sovereign. So they're preemptive, they're primary, their ultimate characteristic or attribute, so to speak, of God is not holiness necessarily, it's sovereignty. control. So if he's got creatures that like doing whatever they want, and he didn't even maybe know they were doing it, like what's happening? So they would, most Calvinist types, if they're following Calvin, would say like, I'm not actually sure. Many Calvinists don't say this one right here. They came out clean, but they had the ability to sin. They're like, yeah, but that makes like God out of control right from the start or something. And so they often will say things like, well, actually God maybe knew they were going to sin. That's a very Arminian thing to say, like foreknowledge. He knew it all. But they often say like, no, he actually made it happen. Like God actually set this up, and there will be those who were chosen or elected to sin. Not just like, oh, they were chosen because God likes them or something. That's how chosenness is in the Bible. He picks the people that he likes, so-called, or wants to love. A Calvinist will push that on like, actually he rejected, or he chose the people to sin. And so he actually made them, or if you want to throw it on Satan, because you can get humans out of it, but like, oh, we got suckered by like this, this serpent creature. You can get demons possibly out of it, like, I guess they followed the wrong leader, like, oops. But you can't get like Satan, like somebody made a choice. What if Satan was created evil, like pre-made like that way? He's against God because he's already against God when he was created. That makes God the author of evil, actually. That's how I want to be a Calvinist. I can't philosophically or logically, theologically square it with what I think God reveals himself to be. So not the author of evil, but if he made them evil, then they are. He is the author of evil, isn't he? Okay, this course then I will be teaching it from, if you decide to call it an Arminian perspective, I have almost nothing to connect to Jacobus Arminius. It's not my guy, right? But it's just the name people giving it, because he did push back on John Calvin, who I have very little against John Calvin. It sounds to me like he's a really awesome guy. Not an awesome guy, but an awesome theologian. He may or may not have been an awesome guy, but because he tried to behead people, for instance, things like that. But it's really strange. Calvin, you should just look like John Calvin in Geneva, Switzerland, because he never wanted to be there. He never wanted to have anything to do with them. He literally got kidnapped, so to speak. So he was a teacher like me, a professor. That's all he ever wanted to do, like be a professor of theology, like leave me alone. During the times of like the Reformation, there's all sorts of craziness going on. He got kidnapped basically and forced to be the mayor. And their mayors were stronger than, their mayors were kind of like bigwigs. He was forced to be the mayor of the town. He's like, I don't even want to do, I never want to do this. I'm a theology professor. They're like, no, and they take him off by horseback. They make him, install him a mayor. He's like, but I told you, if I'm the mayor, I have to do it theologically. Kind of like probably what I would say, right? And they're like, yes, that's what we, Reformation all day. He's like, but theologically, if I think that Catholics have rejected Jesus, they tended to have some connections back to the Old Testament, so to speak, in ways of how to rule, how to govern. Well, in the Old Testament, if you have an apostate, Jewish person who becomes un-Jewish, they're supposed to be killed. So I think Catholics have done that. They should be killed. And he's like, if you guys put me in charge, that's the kind of stuff I'm going to do. They're like, Calvin all day. He's like, okay, well, it gives Catholics a week or something to literally leave town. Remove yourself from our presence. If we catch you, you're dead. Which they did. A lot of them, they didn't leave, so he catches them and they're dead. And then he started in on what I would call non-Calvinist, but people who didn't align with him theologically, he's like, well, they're apostate also. And you start maybe we just need to kill off basically everybody. And you start at John Calvin is maybe giving the credit for it. Others were doing it too. That's how you get the separation all over Europe, Calvinist town, Catholic town, not Calvinist or Catholic, but you got Protestant, so maybe Lutheran kind of ish. And then you get he was talking about chapel, the prayer guy, Pastor Kevin or whatever his name was. That was his name, I just don't know his last name. The Sri Lankan guy, he talked about Herrnhut, it's actually Herrnhut, but Count von Zinzendorf, Ludwig von Zinzendorf, who was a really rich guy. All that Zinzendorf was filthy rich. That's all he had. But he couldn't believe that people were being killed like that. He's like, this is crazy. So all he did was let people come stay at his estate. That's the name of the estate, is Herrenhut or Herrenhut. So Herrenhut, he's like, hey, you can come stay at Herrenhut, my estate of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of acres that you own. You can stay here if you're trying to like not be that, you don't want to get your head chopped off. Those Christians, some of whom were, not actually many, some of whom were Moravians, that was mentioned in chapel, who were, they're not Calvinists, kind of affiliated a little bit, I might call them Calvinists. They're definitely not Catholic, they're definitely not Lutheran, they're kind of what turn out to sort of be like Methodists later, before there were Methodists. They came there, and they're all gung-ho about like, listen, we just want to serve Jesus, that's all we know what to do. There's Catholics that come there, it's like an ecumenical place, and they started 100-year prayer meetings, which is why we have missions around the world going out of Europe. But okay, all that to say, there's people who have differences of opinion here. I'll be teaching it from what I perceive to be a more biblical perspective, do the best I can, which will include, they had the ability to sin, but weren't made sinful to start with. Satan wasn't, demons weren't sinful to start with, humans weren't sinful to start with. They all chose to fall down here. Sin was a free, uncompelled moral choice. They chose it because they wanted to. They didn't have to. I'm not sure how it would have gone if like Satan was like, I'm not gonna fall, I'm not gonna do it, I'm not making the bad choice. Well, then I guess he wouldn't do it, then it seems like demons wouldn't do it. And we always postulate in our minds, because we're conceptual beings, or abstract beings, right? Like, I wonder if the third demon in line, or third angel in line would have fallen instead. It's all hypothetical, we don't know that, right? Sometimes you say that, like, I know Eve made a bad choice and Adam followed through, well, I would have done it too. Honestly, you don't know that. That's all hypothetical. If you were standing in the same spot, maybe you would have made a good choice. That's what God expected, meaning that's what he required, not just expected. He required that, like, you will make a good choice. If you don't, the soul that sins dies, and I'll be the one that kills you. I'm not just going to enforce that. It's not like he wanted people or angels to fall. It had to be some way they didn't have to. Okay, some effects of the fall, I think we were here. These are maybe obvious to you, but they have big, they're large consequences, I guess. Relationship with God was distorted, and it's no longer open. So thinking here about Adam and Eve, I don't know exactly what went on with Satan and demons. That's not for us to need to know, right? But for humans, their relationship with God was distorted, and they couldn't talk to him. They immediately, Adam and Eve, are like, we have to do something to hide. And oddly, maybe you find it odd, but God didn't say like, hey, where are you? I caught you. I know you're hiding over there behind the fig leaves. Come out here and make yourself naked again. He didn't do that. He's like, yeah, I don't want to look at you when you're sinful. So fig leaves aren't working. God makes clothing for them out of skins of animals. He's like, yeah, actually, no, I'm not going to talk to you that same way anymore. We're not going to hang out naked and unashamed, if you want to think of it that way, which is directly what it says in the Bible. Okay, moral knowledge is gained, but without the ability to control it. If God created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he must know what evil is. So God must literally be able to, did you ever have thoughts you were like, oh, I should hate that, holy moly, or holy cow, or holy smokes, or holy whatever you say, as you sort of take God's name in vain. But, I mean, isn't that a riff off of, like, something about holiness? But anyway, you say, like, did you ever, like, you're driving down the road, you're like, oh, like, because you guys listen to music or something, and you're like, here comes a semi, I hope he's safe. What if I just whipped right from it and took a head-on crash? You're like, what was that? Or if you're like, hey, there's a female. Like, what am I doing? Or maybe it was male. Or maybe the male was male, I don't know, but anyways, you're like, I'm not supposed to be thinking that, like, why, like, what was that about? Or, like, I just thought this just at lunchtime. There it goes. Somebody, a student, deposited, put $1,000 cash envelope on my desk and didn't even tell me. It was for GoTrip. Supposed to go to the business office people. But anyway, they threw it on his desk and left it there. He wasn't in his office or nothing. And I'm thinking, like, I could, if I could have got that. I'm like, why am I saying that? Because I'm like the leader of a GoTrip praying that people raise their money. Well, I'm thinking how I can steal it. I'm like, that Do you know God has thoughts like that? Like he knows like the knowledge of good and evil. So he knows the baddest thoughts you've ever thought, which I'm sure that there's a lot worse ones you've thought than the ones I used as examples, that you've probably thought of stuff that's just like outrageous. And if you had to tell people, like, I did have a thought, I even thought about that, but I thought a little bit, you're like, whoa, dude, that is so bad. It's like completely evil. God has those thoughts. He knows the knowledge of good and evil, but he has attributes like holiness, complete holiness. He doesn't do them. He doesn't get tempted by them, something like that. You and I do. Adam and Eve did. Okay, fellow humans is distorted. It's totally whacked. I mean, distorted sounds cute, right? But what's the deal with nobody getting along in this world? Like, how hard is it for us to get along? It can't be that hard, right? We're all made in God's image. We resemble God. But there's people dying right now. There's wars going on right now. Literally, your tax dollars are paying people to kill somebody else right now. That's crazy, right? But that's what happens. Happens literally with like you and your roommate. I mean, how hard can it be to get along with a fellow Christian at Bible college, and it's only one. You're only living in the dorm with one other person in your room or something. You can't even get along after that. That's this, written large. Okay, pain in childbirth for females. You have to be female to give birth to a child. And laborious toil, which is towards males, Adam and Eve. The results, they're not cursed themselves, but their work is cursed. Nature is cursed and is subjected to futility. It's in bondage, it says in Romans chapter 8. Humans, okay, we got tempted by Satan, you gave in, like Eve, you gave in, or Adam, you more than gave in, you cooperated with the serpent, but then it didn't even work out. Like, why isn't life easier than that? You get along with Satan and go his way. Why doesn't he make it all good for us? He doesn't. He immediately turns around and makes it bad for them and others. Death. Had Adam not sinned at that time, don't know exactly what would happen. Did he have to keep on making choices or something? That's the idea of probation. Did he have to make like 3 proper, good, and truly good, like holy? Did Adam have to make 3 holy choices, and then God would have been like, okay, like that's good. You proved it. Like that's good. Now you're set. Did he have to keep on doing it, or is this like one holy choice? Like what did he have to do? We don't know that exactly, but we do know the Bible says very clearly in Romans 5, none of us would be dying if it weren't for Adam. Like Eve is not given credit for like bringing death. Adam brings death. And it passes from one man to all people. So thanks, Adam. I'm middle-aged, and so when you hit middle age, it's like the first time you start thinking of like your own mortality. Like, not just getting in an accident, like run over on the street. You guys think about that kind of thing. When you get my age, you're like, I could be getting ready to die, actually. Like, health and all that. I mean, it ain't gonna go on forever. Thanks, Adam. Because otherwise I wouldn't be worried about that. Neither would you. Sin enters. It's not only death that enters us, it's sin. Like, thanks, Adam. Before you pass this down, I guess I never would have had those thoughts or something. Or at least I would not have had a sinful nature that like predisposes me that way. Okay, that's this issue of original state, or original righteousness. What were Adam and Eve like? So they're standing there in the garden. God talks to them a little bit, tells them to like be fruitful, multiply and stuff. They're like, hey, this is cool. All right, see you tomorrow, God. That's how it's presented. Like afternoon, cool of the day, he talks to them. Like, all right, see you tomorrow. We got things to do, or something. And they're supposed to like eat in the garden and make babies. That's like what they're supposed to do. Okay, what were they? They didn't have sin. They hadn't already committed sin, so they're sin-free, if you want to say it that way. And they don't have examples of sin. They don't have people in their past that have sinned. They don't have a bent towards sinning, like, I can't avoid this, That's just, like David, for instance, King David, he says, we were under inspiration of something. We were conceived in sin. somehow your parents were sinful even as they're like making you a baby. Adam and Eve don't have to say that. They don't have sinful parents. They have God as their creator. They don't have anything in the past. So they're like as free as could be, you might say. Temptation for them is completely, at the first, the original temptation, it's completely external. They're not like, oh man, he's not like, I ate the other fruit yesterday that God didn't want us to eat, but I hid it. They don't have any of that. They don't have like this preconceived idea of what it means to be bad or something. So it's a temptation is external. Eventually, like James, the book of James now is like, don't you dare blame Satan for all this anymore. It's your problems and the internal of you that's the problem, not only Satan. But they were being tempted externally, at least Adam. So according to Romans 5, Adam is the guy who, he's the guy who plays the person, he's the human who brings all of this to us, not Eve. And had already done good things. We don't get a lot of info in the story of Genesis about Eve. What was she doing? We're not actually sure. Adam actually names the animal. He actually obeys God before Eve is created. So you go to Genesis 2. This first Genesis 1 sounds like male and female he made them. In the image of God he created them. Oh, here we go. And then you're like, you find out in the Genesis 2 explanation, like God didn't shape Adam and Eve at the same moment, at the same time. Made Adam, breathed the breath of life into him. He's like, hey Adam, how's it going, bud? I got a job for you. Name these animals, which seems like a large job to me. But anyways, the animals come 2 by 2, and he figures out what they're supposed to be called. And he's a taxonomist at that point, and he names them all. So he was obedient. He has an experience of obedience. Like I did yesterday or last hour or whatever. Hey, yesterday, God, I did what you told me to do. He's like, okay, good. Now you're going to take a nap. And now I'm going to shape Eve. There's Eve. We don't know what she did a lot. Like they look at each other, flesh my flesh, bone my bones, and they're going to get married. Okay, what did they do? We don't know exactly, but we do know Adam did stuff good. So he already, up here I said they're sin-free. He wasn't moral choice free. He'd already obeyed God at least once by naming the animals. So he's not clueless. Did you ever get like feedback loops? Did you ever do something, maybe you didn't really want to do it. Maybe just like open the door, let's say, like the door here. You didn't really want to do it. Maybe it's for Kinsey. You're like, I don't really like Kinsey anymore, but I should do this. You like open it, and you get like, well, that was good. Like, finally I'm doing something good in my life like I'm supposed to. Like, I made a good moral choice. You get some endorphins out of it, some dopamine hits and stuff. And you start opening the door for everybody. Everybody's saying thank you, and you're like, yeah, I love this. I love this. And you keep doing it. Adam had at least one of those cycles. Like, what's the name animals? I don't even know. I don't even have language. You tell me how to invent this stuff? I'll live fun. And he comes up with something, he names them all. And God's like, thanks, bud. That's good stuff. He had that dopamine hit, if you want to think of it that way, already from good choices. So that's why he's like, he's not ignorant. If Eve was deceived, so it's put, I didn't say she's ignorant, so she's deceived. But like Adam's not. He knows what it feels like to do good. And then he does bad. Anyways, okay. They didn't have the knowledge of good and evil. So in some ways, they're both ignorant. Meaning they haven't watched all the horror movies you guys have watched, or even the rated R movies you've watched, or even the rated PG-13 movies, or even the PG movies that you guys have watched, or maybe even the Disney G movies that you think you can watch. I mean, they all have like people making choices and stuff, right? They didn't have any of that. They don't like have this whole knowledge of it or understanding of it, but yet it's there. It's knowledge, and God has it. So that's what they're potentially after. That's what the temptation potentially is also. Hey, God has knowledge you don't. Don't you think you want to get it? Even though God said, like, you can't have this knowledge right now. He didn't necessarily tell them, like, you will never eat of that tree. Like, we don't know what he said beyond, like, don't eat that one. Like to justify God, not to use justification, but to justify God, he did say something else, which is, you can eat all of the other trees. You can eat all of them. It's presented as like, sounds like there was a lot of them in this garden. You can eat them all. It's just that one. And that's the one that somehow Satan's temptation externally to them is God's holding out on you. He's got stuff that you don't got, and he's not letting you have it. Versus presenting it as moral, which is God's protecting you. He's actually making sure you don't have knowledge that you can't handle. Which Satan could do that, right? That's probably how you would protect, say, a child. Let's say, because this will happen to you so much. Let's say your 7-year-old kid comes home from school, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, how did you go to school today?" Like, "Good." Like, "What'd you do?" "I don't know, ran around the playground." "What'd you learn?" "Nothing." That's what every single school kid says. "What'd you learn today?" "Nothing." Like, and I say, "Well, what did you really learn?" Like, "I mean, I learned that you can, like, I don't know, but I learned you can have inappropriate sexual relationships with a girl, but you try to narrow it down to like a 4-letter word or something, like, you know, starts with an F, and be like, "Hey, I learned," you're like, "Oh, what happened?" Like, "What did you say?" And you're like, "There's no possible way the kid at 7 couldn't understand this. Like, there's just no way." So I'm like, "What happened?" And they like know the word, but they don't even know it. They're like, "Yeah, you can do this." And you're like, "Do what?" Exactly. They don't even know. They just like heard it. But what is I'm saying that? That's like now, you would, if you were a good parent, you'd steer them away from that and be like, "Okay, they're not actually like doing this or anything, like they're not doing this with a girl. Like, let's just like keep them ignorant and steer them some other direction from this, because this is not appropriate knowledge for you. You protect them." That's what God was doing. Like, hey, there's a knowledge of evil, every single one you can think of. I'm just like steering you around that. You don't need to eat that right now. You don't need to know that right now. You should instead enjoy all the good stuff first, at least. I don't know if you would have told them about it later, but like, "Hey, why don't you eat all these trees? Eat the other trees." You just don't need that knowledge right now. You know, actually, humans could have happily lived never having the knowledge of evil. Like, actually never having done it, never knowing about, like, the stuff you can get away with, the stuff you can do, the bad stuff of life. You don't actually need that to live. You could have zero knowledge of evil and have a good life. That's what humans were created for. Human flourishing doesn't need evil. Let's act like it does. You're like, "Listen, I have to at least find out about some of the stuff bad people do. I gotta know. I can't be ignorant in this world. Sheltered, you know, that kind of thing." Okay, maybe, but not really. You can flourish without evil. Don't actually have to have any bad things happening, and we would be flourishing. God was protecting them, and that's what Satan didn't tell them about. Kind of tricked Eve, like, God's holding out on you. And she must have been curious, and she must have been a learner. She's like, "Okay, I want to learn that stuff." I don't know if she was. I'm trying to give her good credit there, because learning people are generally curious. And Adam was like, "God said don't do it, but whatever. I already know what it feels like to do the good stuff. I've already had those dopamine hits. I think I'll just try to decide if I like the other stuff too, called evil." That's those kind of choices they were making there. Okay, original sin, we'll do on this stuff here a biblical analysis. If you want all the Bible verses for it, you need to go to the Horton textbook. Because there are like dozens and dozens and dozens of them, and then it sort of like clogs up the screen. So if you want Bible verses for like each one of these points, there's lots of Bible verses for it, and there's explanations for them as well. I'm just trying to do them as like bullet points or underlined points here, because we need to get them. What this is, a biblical analysis. If you go take the whole Bible and you try to say, what is it talking about original sin? Like, gather it up. Which biblical, or what biblical ideas must be, not which ones, all of them. What biblical ideas must be accounted for when developing a theory of original sin? I need all the verses from the Bible, so to speak, that somehow reference or would be connected to original sin. If they were on like cards, just like give me all the cards and throw all the cards on the deck or on the table. But let's say there's like, or there's more than that, say 27. There's actually a lot more verses than that, but let's say there's 147 verses you think in the Bible deal with this. Like, that's like a confusing mess. let's see, you try to start to put them into stacks, you know, things that are similar, and you'd come out with these concepts, I guess, or ideas. Original sin, the idea that Adam's sin somehow negatively affects everyone in his first sin, so it's the original one. Okay, there's 2 pages of these only. You're like, okay, that's an easy one, easy lecture. It is, except we're skipping like 150 Bible verses that we could have put up there. So realize that. These are, you know, narrowed down to their like essence. First one, solidarity with Adam. All persons are united with Adam as human. So we're made in God's image. That's the first thing when you talk about original sin. We're not worried about like angels' original sin. We're not sure what it is, when it was exactly. We're not worried about like if did Neanderthals sin or something. Neanderthals might be human. I threw that one out there because no one really knows who Neanderthals were or are. Most of you have Neanderthal blood in you, so-called genes and stuff, and like, were they actually humans also? Like different? We don't know. But if they were made in God's, that's how you know. Like, find a Neanderthal, bring him back to life from his skeleton somehow, like Jurassic Park for humans. Hey, there's a movie idea. You guys, somebody, if you want a movie idea, you can make $1 billion off of that. Jurassic Park for humans. And they bring Neanderthal, Denisovans, and all the other ones I don't know, and they like have a conference where they meet or something. You're like, hey, Neanderthal man, did you ever feel like, did you have a sense, did it sink in that you're made in God's image? Did that like ever come by your, you know, like frontal lobe? If he's like, no. You're like, okay. You go to the next one, Denisovans, they're like, yes, we spent that like every night when I was falling asleep when I was a teenager, I wondered if God was there. Okay, you must be made in God's image. That would make them human. He's everyone's first father. The reason I have these in quotes is you can see them as scare quotes if you want to, or you could see them as just quotes that set off an important point. Was Adam actually everyone's first father? The Bible presents it that way. But it doesn't actually even matter if he really, really, really was, like genetically. If you're like, you know, draw some blood, check the genes, or however they do that these days, skin cells. That it's the biblical, like, here is the storyline to show you how people sin. So if you insist that this was mythological, which some people do, including some people here, that like Genesis 1 through 11 is mythology. It doesn't mean false. That's not what the person means by it. That's not what theologians and stuff. What they mean is it's an explanation of how humans happen and how they sin, what we're dealing with here. It's not saying it's not true. It's saying it is true somehow, and it has truth to it. Here's how humans sin. Maybe Neanderthals were in there too, or maybe they were over on the other side, we don't know. If you're asking me, I tend to hold to it as, not scare quotes, but real quotes here, like, he really, really was your first father. Because all I didn't live back then. I wasn't around way back then. The only thing I got is the Bible. And the Bible presents it as Adam and Eve. Here they are. Boom, like, they're there. So he's our father. I would take it as real. The other reasons I would do that is because other people who wrote the Bible also presented it that way. Like a Peter. He's like, there was Adam, or Paul, I guess, the guy who wrote Romans, that we're talking about a lot. Like, Paul's like Adam. He was a real guy, and he did such and such, and here we go. So I would present it as real, but even if you didn't, if you're like, I can't handle that, I just can't make sense of it. The storyline of the Bible, the plot line, is that humans were there and then fell. So that's, Adam is the one given credit for being the first fallen sinner who spreads it somehow. Nobody's in the Garden of Eden because of Adam. You can hypothesize, I guess would be the word. For instance, what would have happened if Adam, Eve's eating the apple or whatever she's eating, she's like, which is why you have this right here, right? Taking a bite of the forbidden fruit. That is what Apple's logo is about. Okay, taking a bite of the forbidden fruit. What if Adam was like, hey lady, put it down. She's like, it tastes good. It opened my eyes. And he'd be like, no, and he runs away. Or he's like, slaps it out of her hand. He's like, no, you evil lady. Like, you should have done that. We don't know. Like, maybe he was in charge. Maybe he was supposed to do that. That's actually how it's presented. He didn't, though. So he's given credit, like, you didn't even stop it when you couldn't. You weren't even the tricked one, the deceived one. You already knew what it felt like to do good stuff. Like, why didn't you do it again? You did good stuff the other day, why didn't you do good stuff again? You could have got the same dopamine hit or whatever. Like, he didn't. So he's in trouble. He's the guy that caused the problem. Okay, one man's is one sin. It only took one. One person doing one sin. It's not like, you guys can understand if Hitler's become the title for all that's evil in the world or something, like representative person. If Adam was Hitler-like, Hitler-esque, and he did all these horrible things, like all throughout the garden, over and over, weeks, months, and years after year, you'd be like, yeah, he was bad, and it's a good thing God fried him or something. Most of us are like, I mean, Adam did nothing, God. Like, come on, dude, really? He just ate a bite of an apple or something. Like, how bad can that be? I mean, you make excuses every day, so do I. But like, oh, well, it's not that bad. Don't you say that to the Holy Spirit all the time? I mean, I know I should have done it. It's not that bad. I shouldn't have thought that thought. It was not that bad of a thought. I mean, think about the thoughts that, like Dylan is thinking over there. Those are probably bad. Isn't that how you compare yourself to every single person all the time? And no, we all love Dylan, I guess, so. But you got people you don't like. And you compare yourself to them, you're like, well, I'm not doing that. This is one wrong move was enough to sink the whole thing. Okay, corruption from Adam. The Bible seems to present, this is not nice, so it's not Minnesota, it's something else. That was a dig at Minnesota. Okay, anyways. Did no one catch that except me? It's not nice like Minnesota nice. Okay, corruption from Adam. All inherit a thoroughly corrupted human nature. This stinks. Like, if you guys understood this to the level like we should, you know what should happen when I put this up there and display it? You literally should start crying. That's literally like, this is so ridiculous, meaning ridiculously bad. It should make you sad. It should make you like, what kind of garbage is that? Why do we have to even have that? Why does God have to do that? Because he could have done something different, I suppose. Everyone, all means all people, inherit a thoroughly corrupted human nature. And this would be the worst thing. There's some people who have babies around here, so you've seen some little babies and stuff recently, right? So maybe you have your own little baby. You look at them, hope you're excited and happy and coolest, like, oh, my baby. And theologically, you're looking at them like, oh, my sinner headed to hell. Why did I bring you into the world? Because you're on a downward path right now. This is your best day of your life right now. And you're not even very many days at that point. Total depravity. That's the idea of total depravity. Everybody's infected with sin somehow. From Adam, everyone is headed towards death. What if you had the little baby and you're like holding them, let's say they're like 6 weeks old, they start they have a little bit of expressions, they'll smile at you a little bit. You're like, oh, hey, how's it going? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, you're starting to talk, aren't you? And the kid's like, well, actually, Dad, I have a couple of questions for you. Could you tell me the real truth? What's the end of life gonna look like? You're like, why? You should ask me that. I ain't telling you that answer, kid. He's like, tell me the real truth. You're like, you don't want to know the real truth. I mean, if you continue on the path you're on, cutie little kid, guess where you end up? Burning in hell forever. Like, that's what you're thinking as a parent. You're like, logically, I know this to be true, and I don't want it to be true. And you literally think things like, I gave birth to this kid. If they don't make the right moral choice at some point to serve Jesus, follow Jesus, I just birthed a person so they could go to hell. Yeah, that's nasty. It's like disgusting, right? That kid could even be like, hey, Daddy, I got a little extra, I'm gonna figure some other plan out. I got a different religion to figure out. I'll be nice to everybody. I'm like, still go to hell anyways, too bad you did a lot of good stuff, but it ain't good enough. That's what the Bible teaches us about people. Romans 5 has, if you want like Romans 5, or you need one spot, Romans 5, 1 through 12, you're like, or 1 through 18, that's how far you want to read. Or go back to Romans chapter 1 and read it up through Romans chapter 5, you're like, this is horrible. Like, Jew or Gentile, they both had God's law, and they both suppressed the truth, and they both don't follow it, so every single one of them is falling short of the glory of God. And we get to Romans 5, like, this goes back to Adam. Every single one has suffered death because of Adam. He brought sin to every single person that's ever been born since Adam, which is every person that's ever been born. And you're like, well, this is not very pleasant to read. This is not very good at all. And it's not, actually. Keep going through Romans, and Paul's like, by Romans 8, he's like, you know what's the worst? I'm the one writing to you under inspiration, and I'm bad too. Like, I can't get it right. Chapter 7, I try to do good stuff and I can't. Here's an apostle who wrote more books of the Bible than anybody, Apostle Paul. And he's literally telling you, Romans 7, like, I'm really bad. I even know what I should try to do and I can't do it. And I do the wrong thing instead. I'm not just neutral. I just do the other stuff. Unfortunately, you're all like that too. I know a little bit about most of you, you know, I'm around you long enough to find out, like, you're pretty much the same way. And you get around me and you realize it's the same thing. Okay. Guilt from Adam. Not only is it corruption, this idea that somehow we have like pollution. If you want to think of corruption as like dirt, dirtiness or something. We have corruption from Adam. So what if you have a little kid, you're like, well, you look just like Adam, you act like Adam, you act like me, you're probably a sinner. And the kid's like, no, on the inside, I'm good. And you're like, no, actually, probably you're not. Because Adam, or Romans 5 says Adam brought guilt, which is judgment. This is like actual sin that gets actually judged. This is like dirt or pollution. Somewhat, if you want to think of this as external and this is internal, somewhat of a way to think of it. You know, internal to your spirit, so-called. And it's not only your spirit, but when we talk about body, soul, spirit, it's not just your spirit, it actually affects your soul, like the way you think. And that affects your body. When your body does sinful things, and you're like, what is happening? Why can't kids, for instance, just grow up and nobody really does anything bad to them, so-called? You're a good parent, you take care of them really well. They get a new little sister or brother, and they're like, oh, hey, you know, like give them a hug and stuff. And they just happily do that. Like, why did they always get in a fight? Why do you always have siblings that get in a fight? Why did Theo is a person here who I happen to know. Do you remember one time you kicked Ivy down the stairs? Yes. When they were little boy brothers or whatever fighting about something, Theo just, you know, the stairway from the second floor was like, see ya, kid. Down the stairs they go. I think you were maybe like halfway up, so it wasn't quite so bad. But why are they like that? They don't have to be like that. Like, what's that about? That's this idea of it's internal also. Like your spirit then comes out in like your body. Your body does things. That is from Adam. If Theo had been a theologian then, he would have been like, oh, sorry, Dad. It's Adam. It's Adam coming alive in me again. Or something like that. And I really would have been upset. Okay. Guilt has to be punished. What are you supposed to do about it? God can't just let it go. He's holy. If he lets it go, the universe becomes corrupted. We already have enough of that going on, right? Like, you can't just let it go. All these other things we'll pick up next time. You should think about this page and go look up the Bible verses because no one ever likes these. These are the ones that all the Christians in the whole world try to get out of. Like, no, it's not that bad. Don't think of your kid that way. I don't know. The Bible says think of your kid that way. What am I supposed to say? Or, no, like, I mean, you don't have to be infected by that stuff. You are. That's what the Bible says. So go look around on these things and kind of like look through them. Even like this, the ground is cursed. You've never seen beautiful creation the way it truly could be. Not even close. Like, okay, that stinks. If you're an outdoors person like I am, you know, like to see a landscape or something, you're looking at a corrupted, bound in bondage to futility landscape. That's no fun. Like nothing on these pages is fun. And most of us don't like these things, so we tend to ignore them. All right, we'll pick it up next time with those, finish those up, but look around in your book.